The U.S. Embassy in Iraq was attacked on Tuesday, and President Trump says it will not be another Benghazi. CNN had an in-depth interview with singer Linda Ronstadt, who compared the president to Hitler. And the New York Times says that 2019 was the worst year ever for journalists. All that and more. I'm Bobby Eberle. This is a 13-minute news hour.
And God bless the United States of America.
All right, friends, welcome to the show. Happy New Year. I hope your celebrations last night were great. There was some big news yesterday, actually, in this attack, this protest and attack on the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, Iraq. And unlike the attack in Benghazi in Libya, President Trump didn't blame a video or say it was a spontaneous uprising. And also, unlike the Obama administration, he took swift action and called out Iran for the attack, unlike, say, conservatives getting the blame or something like that. Here's a report from the Washington Times. The Trump administration scrambled to ramp up security at the U.S. Embassy in Iraq and tamp down a brewing crisis in the Middle East on Tuesday after an Iran-backed militia launched a brazen attack that briefly breached the walls of the U.S. diplomatic compound in Baghdad. The protest, led by members of the Iraq Shiite militia Kateb Hezbollah, turned violent when the demonstrators stormed the U.S. facility and set fire to a reception area inside the embassy complex. Although no casualties were reported, the shocking incident ratcheted up already high tensions between Washington and Tehran, with the government in Baghdad caught squarely in the middle. The embassy raid was a direct response to U.S. airstrikes over the weekend that targeted militia outposts in Iraq and Syria. The Iraqi government criticized the airstrikes, and Iran cast them as an example of American terrorism across the region. Now, President Trump didn't mess around. He was quick to condemn Iran for the actions that happened in Iraq at the embassy. Here's what he tweeted. He said, "The U.S. Embassy in Iraq is and has been for hours safe. Many of our great warfighters, together with the most lethal military equipment in the world, was immediately rushed to the site. Thank you to the President and Prime Minister of Iraq for their rapid response upon request. Iran will be held fully responsible for the lives lost or damage incurred at any of our facilities. They will pay a very big price. This is not a warning, it's a threat. Happy New Year." So for more on the background of this situation and what led to it, here's more from the Washington Times. U.S. national security leaders stressed that the Baghdad demonstration was a symptom of a much larger issue: growing Iranian control over large portions of Iraq. Although the two countries fought a brutal war in the 1980s, Iran's Shiite theocracy has numerous economic and religious links to leading Iraqi clerics and officials. The Popular Mobilization Forces, an umbrella group of the Iraqi Shiite militias with links to Iran's military, has raised its influence and political clout in the wake of its role in helping turn back Islamic State control in Iraq. It's a sign of Iranian control over Shia militia groups, not a sign of Iraqi anti-Americanism. Former White House National Security Advisor John Bolton, a noted Iran hawk, said in a Twitter post, "We must protect our citizens from Iranian belligerents." All right, so again, we have to keep an eye on the situation, but it's so interesting to watch and to contrast what happened here with what happened in Benghazi, because it shows not only a willingness of the Trump administration to send in the forces necessary and do something about it, but not mess around with showing who the real enemy is. Where the Obama administration, and at that time Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, they didn't know what was going on. They blamed a video. They said it was spontaneous, even though they knew it was coordinated. They send out their people, Susan Rice, to talk about it as if they didn't know already what happened, what was going on, what the cause is, and they did nothing. 4 Americans died because the Obama administration did nothing about it. And now here we have the Trump administration doing what is necessary to make sure this doesn't escalate, to make sure American lives at the embassy are safe, and I have no doubt that's what he'll do. So next, I want to talk about a CNN interview, because you think, okay, CNN is supposedly a news source, and they're going to sit down and they're going to have an interview. And this time, they talked with Linda Ronstadt, singer for decades. And what was one of the things they brought up? Her singing career, things like that. No, they wanted to have an in-depth political discussion. And so I guess they figured Linda Ronstadt was the go-to person to talk about it. And of course, right there shows that it's just going to be weird. But then Anderson Cooper talked about, I guess he brought up some of the things that Ronstadt had talked about in the past, comparing President Trump to Adolf Hitler. So Cooper likened the conditions of what's going on in America now to pre-Nazi Germany and pre-Hitler Germany, and let her just kind of run with it. And here's what she said.
Well, great parallels. I mean, the intelligentsia of Berlin and the literati and all the artists were just busy doing their thing. And there were a lot of chances, as Hitler rose to power, there were a lot of chances to stop him, and they didn't speak out. And the industrial complex thought that they could control him once they got him in office, and of course he was not controllable. And by the time he got established, he put his own people in place and, stacked the courts and did what he had to do.
So that's just weird. And then Cooper, in classic lame journalistic style, acts surprised. And here's his response.
I think a lot of people, though, would be surprised to hear comparisons between what happened then and now.
So he's not surprised at all. He just wants Ronstadt to jump in and elaborate, go on, explain even more, which is exactly what she does.
If you read the history, you won't be surprised. It's exactly the same. Find a common enemy for everybody to hate. When I was sure that Trump was going to get elected the day he announced, and I said it's going to be like Hitler, and the Mexicans are the new Jews. And sure enough, that's what he delivered.
So wow, President Trump is the new Hitler, and Mexicans are the new Jews. This is news at CNN. This is their political analysis. In the mix of interviewing a singer, they go into politics. And do they actually expect it to be real commentary? I mean, they knew what they were getting when they interviewed her. It's so nutty, and yet they put this out as part of an in-depth interview. It's just nuts. So now I want to talk about the New York Times, because we're closing out the year. There's lots of year in review type of things. We went through our top 5 worst political people and events in the last show. Well, the New York Times put out a big editorial in their paper, and they said that 2019 was the worst year ever for journalists. And who do they blame? They blame the Trump administration. And here's a report from the Daily Caller. The New York Times claimed that 2019 forebodes ominous signs for journalists because of President Donald Trump in an article published Monday ahead of the new year. The Times article wrote that Trump has used his fake news term 273 times in 2019, noting that this number is 50% more than 2018. This is one of multiple reasons why 2019 was allegedly the darkest year yet for journalists in the Trump era, according to the publication. Mr. Trump's vilification of the news media is a hallmark of his tenure and a jagged break from the norms of his predecessors. Once a global champion of the free press, the presidency has become an inspiration to autocrats and dictators who ape Mr. Trump's cry of fake news, according to Monday's article. So they think this is the worst year ever for journalists. And what was really interesting about the Daily Caller's article is they point out that currently there are 0 journalists being imprisoned in the United States of America. 0 journalists. On the other hand, there are 10 imprisoned in Russia. There are 11 currently imprisoned in Nigeria and another 11 in North Korea. In all, worldwide, there are 250 journalists in prison because of what they said, what they wrote, what they did, and there are 0 imprisoned in the United States of America. And yet, we are the bad country. This is the worst time ever for journalists. It's just so strange. Here's more from the Daily Caller. Mr. Trump has long oscillated between taunting, cajoling, criticizing, and manipulating the journalists who cover him, according to the article. Domestically, journalists in Washington say Mr. Trump's behavior this year has only deepened their unease. What does that even mean? Deepen their unease? Like they can't go to work? Like they can't cover an actual story? because they feel unease. That's just the strangest wording. And it just shows that their unease comes from the fact that we have a president that fights back against left-wing media. It didn't matter if you have Obama or establishment Republicans. Everyone rolled over to the left before. And this is one of the big reasons for the rise of President Trump, is because we needed it in this situation for finally someone to fight back and say, we're not going to take that. We're not going to let you spin stories with just one agenda, an agenda-driven, left-wing, agenda-driven narrative. We're not going to do that anymore. President Trump fought back. He's inspiring others to do the same. And that is what is leading to this journalistic unease. It's so strange. So finally, I want to wrap up with another 2019, and that is how President Trump is doing. And a new poll has come out that really has to have the Democrats shaking, because often when I refer to polls, I use Rasmussen reports. They track the president every day. Currently, President Trump on that poll is 2 points higher than Barack Obama was at the same point in his presidency. Now, I want to talk to you about some new results from Zogby Analytics, and they do not paint a good picture for the Democrats running against President Trump, or just the feeling in the country that is supposedly so anti-Trump, so pro-impeachment. It's exactly the opposite. And here's a report from the Washington Examiner. Voter approval of President Trump has hit 50%, the magical and much-needed base level for re-election. And he is leading the top Democratic presidential candidates in the 2020 presidential race, according to a new national survey. In the latest Zogby Analytics survey shared with Secrets, Trump is above water on his approvals, 50% positive to 48% negative, a key level his political team has been pushing him to get to. What's more, he is building support with independents, Hispanics, and women, according to pollster Jonathan Zogby. So, not only is his overall approval up, which is funny because the Democrats have been pushing impeachment, and impeachment sentiment has gone down as the president's approval has gone up, but he is also gaining ground among key constituencies, independents, women, minority groups. All of those are on the rise, and that is a great sign for what the president is doing. Here's more. As has been the case for the past few months in our polling, Trump performs well with the most vulnerable voters. Lost a job? 65% at least somewhat approve, to 33% who somewhat disapprove. Afraid of losing a job? 52% to 45%. At a job that pays less? 52% to 47%, at least somewhat approve. And gone without food for 24 hours? 57 to 44. That, added with Trump's 51% support with millennials and 56% support with Gen X, has helped give him an edge over the top 5 Democratic candidates fighting it out in Iowa. And I think that is so significant because people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and all these left-wingers, they try to appeal to the people who are most vulnerable, saying that things are so bad. And yet those people in dark situations actually favor President Trump. His approval rating is higher among them than the general population. So that is a very bad sign for Democrats. And it just comes as 2019 has shown all the great things that the president has done. When he makes promises on regulations, on taxes, on border wall, on defunding the Obamacare mandate, or pulling back from the Obamacare mandate, not only does he take on the left, not only does he take on Democrats, not only does he take on the media, but he is following through on his promises in a business-like manner. You know, the rough around the edges approach is what's needed now. It's the only way to cut through all of this, and we are seeing the results. So good for President Trump, good for the polling numbers, bad for the New York Times, who think journalists are uneasy and scared and snowflakey, you know, whatever. But that's our show for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe, and when you do, please hit that bell so you'll be notified, and we'll see you next time. I'm Bobby Eberle. This is a 13-minute news hour. Okay, friends, just a little reminder before you go, and no, this does not count against my 13 minutes. Please hit the subscribe button below and tell your friends. And if you happen to miss our last show, you can check it out right here. And also for great conservative news and commentary, please check out GOPUSA.com. All right, folks, we'll see you on the next show. Have a great day.